I stood frozen in horror as the police officer loaded my blind son's guide dog, Cooper, into his patrol car. My 16-year-old son, Michael, sat sobbing on our front lawn, utterly helpless without his companion. Our HOA president, Margaret Wilson, stood nearby, smirking with satisfaction. After 20 years of enforcing federal law, I was now witnessing it being trampled in my own front yard. What would you do if someone tried to steal your disabled child's lifeline and thought they could get away with it? A year ago, Michael lost his sight in a car accident. Cooper, a golden retriever, became his connection to independence. He wasn't just a dog. He was Michael's eyes, his confidence, and his bridge to a world that had suddenly turned dark. As a widowed father raising a disabled teenager, I wanted a peaceful community where we could rebuild our shattered lives. Pine Grove Estate seemed perfect. Tree-lined streets, excellent schools, and a tight-knit community, or so the sales agent claimed. We had only been in our new home for 2 weeks when Michael felt confident enough to venture into the neighborhood with Cooper. Watching them from the porch, I felt a glimmer of hope. Michael's hand rested on Cooper's harness, his steps becoming more assured. I thought we had finally found a place to heal, but I was wrong. 3 days after Cooper's first neighborhood walk, a letter arrived. It was slipped under our door like a covert threat. Violation, unauthorized animal on premises, $750 fine, immediate removal required. My hands trembled as I read it. This wasn't about rules, it was about prejudice. I immediately called an emergency meeting with the HOA board, armed with Cooper's service animal certification and ADA documentation. At the meeting, Margaret Wilson barely glanced at the papers before sliding them back across the table. "Your situation doesn't exempt you from our covenant," she said, her eyes narrowing at Michael, who sat quietly beside me. Cooper remained perfectly still at his feet. "Some residents find certain disabilities unsettling. The visibility of it all." I explained calmly, the Americans with Disabilities Act specifically protects service animals. Federal law supersedes HOA regulations. Margaret exchanged glances with her board members. "We've had other residents attempt to claim special status before, Mr. Parker. This is an exclusive community. Rules maintain our standards." One board member quietly corrected her. "That's Judge Parker." Recognition dawned on his face. Margaret's eyebrow arched slightly. "Your profession doesn't grant exemptions here. This isn't your courtroom." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Besides, there are plenty of appropriate communities for people with special needs. Perhaps Pine Grove isn't the right fit for your situation." As we left the meeting, Michael whispered, "Dad, why do they hate Cooper so much?" I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth, that Cooper wasn't the problem. In Margaret's eyes, it was Michael's disability that threatened her perfect community. I placed my hand on his shoulder, silently promising that I wouldn't let their prejudice drive us from our home. What followed was a calculated campaign of intimidation. Security cameras were installed facing our home. Neighbors documented our every move with smartphones. 3 anonymous calls to animal control claimed Cooper was aggressive toward children. Each visit left Michael more anxious, more reluctant to leave our home. When Michael attempted to join neighborhood teens at the community pool, Margaret personally intervened, loudly announcing that his special needs require parental supervision at all times. I documented everything meticulously, just as I would prepare evidence for a federal case. Voice recordings, emails, photographs, witness statements. I had it all. But I said nothing about my profession. Strategic silence was my advantage. The HOA began issuing new regulations targeting us specifically. All animals must be registered with DNA samples. Residents with special accommodations must submit monthly medical verification. Specially trained animals must wear muzzles in common areas. Each violation carried increasing fines, now totaling thousands. When I formally contested them, Margaret responded with a letter stating, "The board finds your constant complaints disruptive to community harmony. Further disputes may result in lien proceedings." One evening, I found Michael sitting alone in the dark, Cooper's head in his lap. "They want us gone because I'm blind, don't they?" he asked quietly. That night, I made 2 calls, one to my clerk to clear my docket, and another to a civil rights attorney colleague. Margaret Wilson had no idea what she had set in motion. Yesterday began like any ordinary Tuesday. Michael had a mobility training session after school, so I dropped him and Cooper off before heading to court. I was presiding over a complex interstate commerce case when my clerk rushed in during a brief recess. "Judge Parker, it's an emergency. Your son just called from your home number." Michael's voice trembled through the speaker. "Dad, they're here, police and animal control. Margaret is saying Cooper attacked someone. They're trying to take him away. I don't know what to do." I could hear the commotion in the background, multiple voices, Cooper's confused whining and Margaret's shrill accusations. "Michael, stay calm. Put Cooper on his lead and show them his service vest and ID. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't let them take him without proper documentation." As I raced home, pieces of Margaret's plan became clear. She had orchestrated an emergency HOA vote regarding dangerous animals precisely when she knew I'd be in court. The community newsletter announced it with barely 24 hours' notice, a copy deliberately misdelivered to our neighbor's mailbox instead of ours. Then she made her checkmate move, calling police with claims that Cooper had threatened a child during his morning walk. No witnesses, no evidence, just her word against a disabled teenager. By the time I turned onto our street, a small crowd had gathered. Officer Bryant stood beside his patrol vehicle, its rear door open. Cooper was already halfway loaded inside. A tearful Michael sat disoriented on our front lawn, reaching desperately into empty air, his white cane thrown carelessly aside. "The dog lunged at the Peterson boy," Margaret was telling the gathering neighbors, her voice pitched to Carrie. "We've had concerns for months. Just because the child is blind doesn't mean we should risk community safety." I approached slowly, taking in every detail. Officer Bryant's uncomfortable expression, the animal control van waiting at the curb, Margaret's triumphant smile, and my son's tears. 15 years on the federal bench had taught me the importance of timing. I needed to see exactly how far they would go before revealing my hand. "Officer," I said calmly, "may I ask what's happening here?" "Sir, we've received reports of an aggressive animal. I'm just following protocol," he replied. Margaret stepped forward. "Finally, we're addressing the situation. You were warned, Mr. Parker. Rules exist for everyone's protection." I looked at my son, reaching blindly for his guide dog, his entire world being torn away by neighborhood prejudice disguised as policy. Something in me shifted irrevocably. "You should have followed the rules from the beginning," Margaret shouted, pointing dramatically at Cooper. "Special treatment leads to chaos. First dogs, then who knows what kind of people moving next." The crowd murmured agreement. Officer Bryant looked increasingly uncomfortable, but continued the procedure, checking Cooper's tags and preparing the paperwork for animal control. "There's a process for requesting accommodation," Margaret continued, playing to her audience. "You can't just move in and expect everyone to change for you. This neighborhood has standards." Michael's silent tears, as he reached blindly for his missing companion, broke something fundamental inside me. I watched his fingers grasp empty air where Cooper should have been, his security and independence being stripped away by small-minded cruelty masquerading as community standards.